All right. Hey, everyone. We're here with the mechanical engineer. We just finished up part one where we went over some basic list syntax and some built-in methods associated with lists. So now what we're actually going to do is start with a really easy question, make you think a little bit. This is a question that, might get asked over the phone, just an initial code screen, just to make sure that you know some really basics about coding. So we have a list at the top there with a bunch of elements, all integers, right? So if I were to ask you to return the minimum of that list, what would you start thinking to do?
So we just talked about a bunch of these functions or the dot things. So is there like a mylist dot min or minimum?
Yeah, so there is actually, it's a little, I guess, it's a shortcut, I guess. We'll go over another way to do it after. But yeah, so why don't you just print, so what do you think it is, min?
If I had to guess, I'd say mylist dot min.
So in this case, actually, it's going to be min. It's got like the length function where we call it as a function itself. So in this case, it's min
mylist.
Mylist. Yeah. Okay. Why don't you print that? What do you think it's going to return?
3, if I had to guess.
Yeah. So I know this is a really trivial example, but in general too, or like a really good practice to get into is, especially when you're dealing with things like this where you have complete control over the whole program, you kind of want to have a goal in mind before you run something. So in this, you can just say out loud, like to your interviewer or me, when you're learning, I think this will return 3, and then when you run it, it should. You don't want to like dictate your thoughts based on the output. You might, you want to make sure logic. And if you have notes next to you, that they all match up, right?
Gotcha.
Anyway, so that works. That's really quick. Quick for you. But can you think of any other way you might want to do? Let's pretend that min doesn't exist. And there is a corresponding max, by the way, too. So let's just assume that that method doesn't exist. You think of a more like algorithmic way to do this?
Yeah, so like going back to my C++ days, we like learned a little bit about like for and if loops. And so if there was a way to like compare each number to one another, I guess, until you get the smallest number, I think that could work.
Yeah, that would actually be a pretty efficient way to do it. You'd only have to go through the list one time. There's one other method actually I was hoping we get to, but a semi-faster way would be, I'm sorry, not faster than looping through once, but another way to do it would be actually just sorting the list.
Okay.
So if you just call mylist.sort, and then just open and close parentheses. So what this just did, you can hit enter. So what this just did is it sorted my list in place. So if you tried to print the return of that, it would return nothing because it returns, it's literally just modifying my list in place. So now if you print my list, why don't you do that? You'll see that it's in order. And then in this case, if you had to return the minimum, then you could just print the my list 0, and that will give you 3, just like it did with that min keyword. And honestly, under the hood, I'm sure it doesn't work like this. We'll actually go through how I think that one probably works, a little more efficient, but there you go.
Okay.
So now let's go back to what you were just saying, right? You said there's a for loop you can loop through and compare.
Yeah.
So you can go ahead and delete all that so we don't sort it anymore. So we'll talk about this in the next lesson, but just because you brought it up, we can try to work through the solution for it. So in this case, if you want to loop through my list, the syntax for that is going to be for, and then any variable temp placeholder you want. So I usually use ELEM for element, right? Space in, and then my list. And then put a colon there because remember, anytime you put an open curly, right? So what this is doing is every iteration of this loop, we're going to have a first iteration will be 100, and then 9, 3, and like that, right? So now you said you wanted to compare it to each of them, right?
Yeah.
So let's assume, just for the sake of this, that the numbers are all going to be positive. That'll make our life a little bit easier. So what do you want to compare it to?
I would compare the first element to the second one, and then I would take the lower of the two if I could, and I would keep doing that all the way through.
Okay, so in that case, it would actually probably, with that logic, it would probably return 114, because if you're always comparing two adjacent terms, then when you got to the end, you see what I mean?
Okay.
So for the sake of time, I'll just tell you, because again, this is kind of more advanced than what I was hoping to get through for this lesson, but on line 11 there, you can just define a variable called like mymin, we'll call it. And you can assign that to 0, because like I said, these are all going to be positive integers, right?
Okay, yeah.
So now we have a reference point, right?
Yeah.
And so what you can do, actually, you know what you're going to do? mymin, set that to the first element in the list. I apologize.
Oh, 100.
No, so set it to, but in this case, let's pretend that we don't actually know what my list is going to be. So you would just set it to my list at 0, right? So now this will make it so if this is a function, it'll take in a list. You can just start with that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So now what you'll say is, so LM, what is LM again going to be?
LM is going to be one of our elements in our list, right?
Right. So for each iteration, it's going to go up by 1, or I'm sorry, move to the right 1, right? So
I believe so,
you can just have a comparison with a conditional, like you said, with an if statement, and check if that element is less than your minimum.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So if LM space and then less than, so the caret, right? And it'll be my underscore min, because that's our reference point, right?
Yeah.
So now put a colon there. So now if this returns true, meaning we execute this code right here, what do you think we're going to do?
If it's true, then we want to reassign my min as that element.
Right. So why don't you just type that right there?
Equals LM.
Right. So then at the very end of this, outside of the for loop, enter backspace. So because remember, indentation level will dictate what's run. So now right here, you're still in the for loop, right?
Yep.
Why don't you cut out one more level of indentation there? There you go. Now why don't you print my min? There you go. Why don't we run that? We'll see if the logic we had was correct. There you go. So we'll talk. This is a more advanced thing about runtime complexity and everything. But basically, when you call sort, the sort operation is going to be pretty costly compared to the solution that we have. So in this case, if you think about it, we're only passing through our list one time, right?
Yeah.
If you wrote the code, my list can be anything. Let's assume it's a positive integer list.
Yeah.
It can be any input, and this will always return the minimum. And it's only going to pass through our list once.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So the things to note for this one is how to iterate through lists. So that line 12 there for something in this name, that's really important.
Okay.
Don't forget colons at the end to declare what scope you're in, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, you kind of found that min keyword pretty quick. So a funny, a thing to think about with Python is that in general, if you can think of it just with your own logic, chances are it's going to be in the language somewhere. It's kind of like an ongoing joke is that it's like very much like pseudocode. So yeah, overall, pretty good job. Like I said, next lesson, we're going to go over more about these loops and and these conditional statements. So if and else, right? So, but yeah, any questions?
No, I'm all set, I think.
All right, great. So then, like I said, next time we'll get going a little more in depth with this stuff, and we are going to be using lists quite a bit. So.
Okay, cool.
All right, great. Thanks.
Thank you.